Hello world! Hello React Rally! Woo! Okay. So, this is just a little talk about how things went down in the past in 2017 and how I was just exposed and eventually learned React by doing civic hacking throughout Texas. But really, who am I? So as you said, I was a freelancer actually. So for like 3 years after being distraught after being an environmental scientist that was laid off by oil and gas, I just started to freelance, and also I was a fencing coach during this time, and along the way, every 6 months, I would do something drastic to try to find a job in tech. And some of that stuff was like becoming a tech organizer and eventually becoming a civic hacker. Today, I actually just started a job recently at Crimson Vista. I'm an associate scientist in training, so we actually do cybersecurity. So, and part of the roles that we do is actually go out and help people that don't have C-level security roles, and we help them time to time. So, but more about civic hacking. So, this is a nice quote that OpenGov has, but really the reality is government is slow. People have needs and problems right now that need to be solved. So what can you do? Pretty much, people in the community can do something about this. Usually, civic hackers are professionals of some sort, but usually they're angry people that want shit done. But in reality, it could be you. You can look in the man in the mirror, which is really bad to say, because I just played a Prince song and now I'm doing Michael Jackson. So why me? Why did I decide to wear my Prince pajamas on the day the mayor was going to show up? Well, I got into civic hacking because I wanted to become a better developer and work in groups, but also I wanted to do something in person. Like, I'm a nice person, so I'll help people out, but I was also dealing with hackathon burnout. So pretty much, I got tired of just going to hackathons, doing things that would actually not see the light of day and just go back to the GitHub graveyard with the to-do apps. But I wanted to actually do something that would make a difference. If we actually spent some time and did something that would be meaningful for someone, other than building something useless, are going to end up, not useless, but end up in the GitHub graveyard, never be seen to the light of day again, I decided civic hacking is the way. And then I found out about this open data thing. The government has a lot of data, you probably have to check right now to see if it's still online with this regime. But I like using open data because the other options are for me not to be a white hat anymore and try to scrape that data. I don't know if you guys have done any web scraping, and that wasn't particularly fun for you guys, but when you do it for the government, I would not want to find out the hard way that orange isn't my color. But however, building apps to be open source is a better idea. We have things that we can build on that aren't full-fledged apps that we have in our ecosystem, right? Like CRA and CRA, great building tools. But when cities have problems, it's just not one city having that particular problem. If we have apps that are open, that if one brigade builds and others are able to use, they don't have to start from scratch. How would you, I know some people at work use CRA. How would you like to build Webpack from scratch? Your builds from scratch. I know some of you guys are like, I don't want to touch that today. And what I learned was civic hacking communities are diverse naturally. Back in Sketch City in Houston, we would have our little meetups, and the population that showed up, the demographics, would match the city. However, civic hacking communities are diverse naturally, but there's a caveat. If there's something going in your city, back in open Austin, like if your city is subject to gerrymandering or just pushing people out, you're gonna see it in your community, and it's gonna be more like tech standards of diversity. So I went down to Austin with a friend to the Austin Hack for Change. And I ended up joining this group that actually had a really mature app going down. So, and pretty much this app was just to figure out, get citizens like involved about changing the budget and actually think about, hey, I want to vote because I want to control what's going on in our budget and what is being used. So we ended up building a stack from a boilerplate using React.js, React Router, Redux, Webpack, and Sass. And by the time I got into it, I was actually, like, this was my first time I actually was able to step in with a mature app and actually get my hands in it. However, things didn't really go my way as I was expected. I thought I was gonna sit in this one room and just dive into React. That didn't really happen. I found out we had this hackathon, which I was really trying to avoid hackathons because like I wanted to actually sleep for once. But there was this one group of designers that had no developers, and out of 100 developers in Austin, no one would come up and help them. And being the nice person I am, I helped them out. But in reality, what I should have done is like pushed them to Gatsby, like migrated to them to Gatsby like low key. But I didn't know about Gatsby back then, so I just suffered through WordPress. I ended up leaving, but I realized I didn't have my keys on me, my attach keys. And I'm really anal retentive about my keys, and I gave it to my friend to like change parking so we could still have free parking, and he just disappeared off the side of the earth. And I was really concerned that I was gonna have to walk back home from Austin to Houston. And for you, some of you guys, you don't realize how big Texas is? That is walking back to Seattle to Portland. How many of you guys would actually do that walk or that drive that often? So I went back to get my keys from him, and his group was having a breakdown. Like, the UX researcher couldn't understand the developers and what they wanted, and at this point, we're nearing the end of the first day, and they have nothing. And in a hackathon, that is dire straits. So I helped them out. I actually like sketched something up for them, and I didn't really know what was going on and what was called, but they were like, oh my God, you did this. And I was like, okay. And then I was telling them where they should put things, and they're like, oh my God, you did another job. And I was like, I realized through this that there's other roles other than developer roles around, and we should appreciate them. You know, it's just not developers. So, with that done, and my keys firmly in my neck, just like today, I went back to my little React group, and we had some bugs. I don't know if any of you guys been down to Texas, but we have cockroaches. They are the bugs I deal with. And similar to those bugs, you have a manager who's usually some like guy screaming at a high-pitched voice at you for dear Lord and wants to squash the bugs away, and I do both. I had experiences with cockroaches, so I took the experience from cockroaches and did the same in React. And that actually helped me build up my confidence in React. So I was the only person in our balanced group of developers and designers and researchers that was actually in Houston. So I actually had to remotely work with them, and which was really lonely at times. But despite the loneliness, I was able to have some success with this in our group, and one of my group members went to London because we won the Internet Health Prize for Mozilla. But then I went back home to Houston, and we had our own hackathon, the Houston Hackathon, where we had to deal with, we actually found out that day that Houston found a pot of money for Section 8 housing, which has now been rebranded as Housing Choice. So we decided, my group became a little mega group, and we decided we're gonna actually go and tackle homelessness and some of the vacant housing due to the oil downturn. Because we had such a large group, we kept it simple. You just had HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and no one really knew like a framework that we could all contribute to in the time frame that we had. So afterwards, we're like, we did not win that hackathon at all. But the mayor was interested, and he was like, I give you permission to bug these people because we have this pot of money and we need to do something. So then we started interviewing, and I had an idea, and I wanted to actually explore React, and I wanted to actually use the data behind in some of these government websites, so we used the WordPress API. And for our backend, we're gonna do Meteor.js. However, we found out these people, these caseworkers, were actually really hard to nail down. We would entice them with a lunch break meeting, but 1 out of 10, they would only show up to meet with us, which got really costly for Houston because we would have to drive 30 to 40 miles in to meet with them. And civic hacking doesn't pay any bills. So we decided to try to find grant money, but that is also a long process that you don't get to see the worth from it until like a couple months down to a year down the line. Even though our group, the 5 dedicated people that stayed, that we narrowed down to it, we could not move forward with this. We just had to realize housing, like insurance, is something hard to improve. But that was okay because this happened. So yeah, this is what happened to my backyard area. Like, this is my neighborhood. First, it flooded the first time with the Palace Inn. And then we have some like service members actually come and direct us out because they're gonna flood the dam, like release the dam release, and then they release the dam waters. And that's the 3rd picture on the top. So pretty much within a week, Houston flooded twice, all because of Hurricane Harvey. So, but because everybody was already established after the Houston Hackathon, everyone was active on Slack, and more people came on Slack that actually had their own, Sandy people came, and other international people came to help us. And we ended up pushing out apps, and people pretty much started to go in groups of what they knew. And most people just migrated to those groups. So we ended up having apps like Harvey Needs being our biggest one, and then having a Muck app for people to actually take out the things out of their house. And also a Twilio app to actually use SSS checks to rescue people and whatnot. So, but when I ended up doing this, we figured out something really important. Low-spec machines matter, and they matter in 2 ways. One, if you're a developer trying to actually do something in a group and you don't have the requirements for something that's heavy, like with RAM, and you don't have that 16 gig of RAM and you're only stuck with 4, there is nothing as more heartbreaking than having someone telling you that your tech is a barrier to entry. However, on the worst side of that clip is if you actually ended up building an app that none of your users can use because they don't have the technology at hand. So you can't really build something for desktop when the library is closed and everyone has their mobile phones. But the library is closed because it's flooded. Setting up dev environments can be a lengthy process, and that's why people gravitated to CMSs like WordPress and those that were comfortable with JavaScript, actually, or in some cases React, we went to CRA. And for some of us, we lost our machines during the flood, so we decided to pair program because two heads are better than one, and you can't really program on a machine that's not there. So, and also, if you have one of these low-spec machines and all you can do is GitHub and clone the repo, and you still want to contribute, you can't even localhost. You can't even get to the point to actually localhost the app, so you have to code blind because everyone's in a rush and a hurry. So we found out it's okay to fail, but fail quickly and just focus on one good feature, because we ended up pushing, we wanted to have one good feature that worked really well and be done with it and move it on. But as I found out again, other roles were very important. So the thing about floods is they bring water, but they also bring diseases in the water, and if you have treatment plants going around, that murks up and becomes a whole thunderstorm of nasty swamp water that you don't want to put your feet into. So they called on me to use my environmental skills to actually help figure out what was in the water as well. But then things changed, and it was Hurricane Irma. And we were like, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe this happened again. However, we already built everything out for Harvey, so it was just plug and play, pretty much change your DNS and just get a new name. Instead of Harvey needs, it became Irma needs. Pretty simple, but we had one thing that came out of Irma that was unique to Irma, which the chat box, which actually allowed people to type in their questions via phone and get answers quite quickly instead of searching forever and then having their phone die before they get the answer. So, yeah. And the thing about Florida, we ended up having a different group of people on the ground in Florida, and they didn't all know each other, they didn't build things together, they didn't trust them. I don't know. Let's do a little exercise. How many of you guys can trust a person's code that's sitting next to you? Show of hands. Oh, I see some hands went up and down. Okay, keep them up. Now, how many of the people that you're sitting next to is a coworker? If they're a coworker, put your hands down. Okay, how many are I don't see any up anymore. I see 1, 2. Are you guys okay, 3, 4, 5, a handful. But now for the next question, are any of you guys sitting next to a Twitter celebrity? Put your hands down. So that's the type of challenge that we had in Florida. And also you had to deal with data sources, and if people didn't trust each other, they couldn't trust the data, and they didn't want to put it up and get people waste their time and money to escape the hurricane just to go somewhere that was closed. And that was a big problem. And then Maria came along, and Maria was different in various ways. We actually moved from Slack to WhatsApp. And WhatsApp has a limit of how many people can be on WhatsApp and actually chat. So we actually lost some people that we haven't heard from at WhatsApp, and some of them we never did hear back from because Maria's pretty bad right now still. Puerto Rico had some challenges, but me and my friends, we had a bunch of us that were like, hey, we know JavaScript, we're comfortable with React now, let's do a mobile app because we do not know Java or iOS apps building skills. And we decided to do that, but then FEMA came along. It was like, you don't have the protocol, you don't have the certifications for this. So it ended up bursting our bubbles, but it was okay because it taught me a lesson that individuals cannot be responsible for that level of things. There are some things that the government has to pick up and should pick up. But also, this is a picture of me getting back to the React community. So because of all this work, working in an open source community that meets in person, it actually allowed me to get more comfortable with open source, so I actually ended up moving back to open source digitally, and also with the React community, and helping them crush Angular for the Christmas party. But what it comes down to, if you got nothing from this talk, is meaningful work. I know some of us have different things that we do for work. Some apps that are more mission critical than others, and some people they're just building is a hot dog. But the thing is, you can just start small and local. Like, there's always somebody around you that needs your skills. But there's different ways you can do this. Plan A, you can be like me and join a brigade. There's usually one in your community. You can find it through one of these links. And if there's not a community there, and if you have the time, you can build your own community. Plan B, if you don't have time, you can convince your workplace. So I was able to convince my workplace to actually, we're going to be helping some people out in the coming months. But truly, you understand the type of workplace you're working in. If they shoot you down and you have an idea they're going to shoot you down ahead of time, I'm like, you have to question where you're working at, if you can even put yourself in that position, right? You know your workplace. That's all I'm saying. And I'm done, guys. Thank you.